Okay, so we're live now with Jasmyne Peck Bailey, or you just go by Jasmyne Peck. Which one do you prefer?
Jasmyne Peck,
Okay.
like Bailey has a long story behind it, and we don't talk to that.
Okay, so we'll just go by
Side.
Jasmyne Peck. She
Yeah,
works as a development exec as well as executive story editor. I'll let you sort of give yourself the
for sure.
introduction that you need, but yeah.
For sure. Yeah, I worked as a development exec up until January 10th of this year, actually, and then transitioned out of that role to write full time. So, yeah, but I did that for like almost a year and worked in development for 4 years, and then started writing last year, got repped last year, and did my first like writer's room and all that, and then those engagements were pretty short. And I was like, okay, this is like too short for me to leave my full-time job. So
Yeah.
like until that happens, I'm gonna just stay in development land. And then I got a longer gig. I was like, okay, like thank you, sayonara.
So for those that don't know, like if you can explain a bit what you do in terms of being a development manager and exec as it pertains to whether that's feature films or a scripted series. I know there may be some differences, so if you can sort of go into the details of what your job entailed for both.
Of course. Okay. So yeah, when I was at the development company, which was Monkey Paw Productions, I like did work on features. I did work on TV and I did work on podcasting. We didn't have like this is a TV division, this is a film division. So it was sort of like we were assigned per project. And it's sort of like a two-parted like bifurcation of work. It's like we're doing submissions, evaluating what types of projects we want to work on, and also like shepherding the projects that we currently had on our slate at the time. So we would get like submissions from like agents, managers, etc., of creatives or projects that they wanted to get in front of us, and then we would read and evaluate those. And sometimes we'd be like, yes, this is fire, let's talk to this person, or let's go after this project. And sometimes we'd be like, this is not right for us right now for whatever reason, including like, this is not what we're looking for on our slate. We're going after this type of thing and not that type of thing. And then on the other side, like once we have a project on, we're working with the creatives that are attached, if there are creatives attached at that point, to make it the best sort of vision possible. And if there aren't creatives attached, we're like ideating what we want the take to be, and then also like putting lists together of people that we want to collaborate with and reach out to when the time does come to attach a creative to that project. And that includes like turning notes around when we're working with like our collaborators. Often we had another like company attached that we were working with, in addition to like the writers, directors, etc., that were involved. And so we would get together, have notes calls, all of that good stuff while we were like carving the project. And then later down the line, once it got to production, we attach like above the line, below the line teams. We would help in those hiring processes, and then go to set and be there while those things were getting filmed, etc. And for the podcasting projects, it's like, you hop in a Zoom for the recording sessions.
So, and in terms of, you said materials will come into you. What type of materials is that would come into you, and how much of a decision do you have in making it moving along one project to the next phase?
For sure. I think like in terms of what comes to us, it looks all sorts of different ways. Like when you're working as a writer, like sometimes you're writing stuff on spec, which means like you're not getting paid for it. You're just like doing that out of the goodness of your heart and your desire to get like a job. So a lot of times a writer will write something on spec, and then like if they have representation, their rep would be like, okay, let's like shop it around. So we get a lot of spec scripts, like people that are looking for like a home for their like project, be it like a television pilot or a feature screenplay. So you get a lot of those. Sometimes you would just get a deck. And that is like, I don't feel like writing a whole like 120-page screenplay for someone to look at right now. So I'm just gonna put what I want the story to be and some like mood pieces, etc., and like a presentation, a keynote, PowerPoint, whatever. So we would get that a lot of the time. And then every now and then we would just have meetings with creatives and they would pitch us in the room. So that's another way that we would get a submission. And every so often a creative would like send something our way themselves. More often than not, I've seen that be most effective when they're like, hey, like I'm in the like trying to make my way in the industry. I want to hear some thoughts. Like if you would have time to like, here's my script, you don't have to read it. I'd love to grab coffee with you or whatever. And then like most of the time people are like, yeah, for sure. I'll take 15 minutes with this person. I might not read their full thing, but I'll take a look at it, etc. And it's a good way to like get in front of people, get your foot in the door in that way too. And then sometimes partner companies also would come to us with projects like, oh, they're working on a thing, like they want Monkey Paw attached for whatever reason. Often it's because it's like a horror movie or something like that. They're not horror like centric companies. They want somebody who knows how to do that. So it'd be like, hey, we're working on this with this person. And we would like read the script and evaluate what like we would want our working relationship to be with said company, etc. And then if we were down with it, we'd be like, okay, let's do this together and embark on that sort of like development process with them. So we have projects that have come to us that way too, like Sinkhole we're doing, or Monkey Paw is doing with Issa Rae's company. And that was one of those situations where it's like, let's go in on this together and make it the best like version of itself possible. There's other stuff that like is ideated in-house where Monkey Paw is just like, we really want to do this movie. And then we attach creatives that way. So yeah, I gotta stop saying we. I don't work there no more.
That's okay. No, and I want to sort of go back to something you said when we're dealing with creatives that maybe are not reps. So what are some best practices that you can sort of impart in terms of being able to connect with a production company or a producer or a development manager and exec? Like some of the best things that you've seen that I think you think creatives should sort of take on if they are on reps, right?
For sure. I think like the thing that worked for me like is finding community, making friends with people, and just like making sure that you're like upfront about your goals and etc. when you're navigating certain spaces. Cause like a lot of people, they don't have time to like block out this swath of time to like dedicate to pursuing like a freelance gig like writing or directing, because it's very like A, it takes investment, so you got to have capital to invest, which is just like, well, terrible in the first place. And B, it's like, okay, like we need health insurance, we need like to be like stable, whatever, so you work within whatever realm you need to in the meantime while you're working on your craft. And when I was working at Monkey Paw, I was like, yes, I love development, it's like a good time, but ultimately my like life goals are to be writing, directing, working in film and television in that sense. So from day one, I was like very upfront about that. And then my coworkers, my friends were like, oh, like, I know you want to be writing. Do you have material? What have you? And I, particular one friend, one day was like, do you have a script? My friend is staffing up a show. And I was like, nah, I don't have I don't have one, which don't do that, like work on your stuff obviously, but I took the time and took a weekend and wrote like a pilot script with some ideas that I had floating around but hadn't like concretized in any way. And so I like did it together. I was like, okay, pop, like fast, very quick. And then I sent it over to her when I didn't hear anything for like a good amount of time. And I was like, okay, interesting. Like it's gone silent. That seems like a great sign. No worries there. And then months and months later, she like these people hit me up from 3Arts who rep me now, and like said that they had read my script. And I was like, how did y'all like get this? And I went to my friend and she was like, oh yeah, I sent this to like a ton of people. I didn't send it to the one person that I said I was going to send it to. So she used her network of people that she had like had made friends with and had community with in the industry, and like allowed me to tap into that way. And so like I was able to start a working relationship with the folks over at 3 Arts, and then they got me into my first room, which was a show on AMC called Kevin Can F Himself. And then in the fall, I did Love Victor, and now I'm on the Spiderwick Chronicles for Disney Plus, but all because I was like homies with with my coworker, you know. And also like it's important to have those support networks and like be able to navigate in a way that feels like sustainable, so that you're not like networking all the time. Just like make friends and let your friends know what your goals are. I think that's what worked for me.
And in terms of when you were in that role with Monkey Paw, did you guys receive any sort of cold messages, or for someone that just had a project idea, they weren't, they didn't have it wasn't coming through an agent or a production company you guys would work with? Did that happen often? Is that something, did that fall into that unsolicited submissions category?
It does fall into the unsolicited submissions category. I would say that like the way that I've seen that particular thing work out is something that I like touched on a second ago, which is like if someone reaches out and they're like, hey, like I'm just really curious about, like, you don't have to actually be curious. That's the cover story, but you need to like to be able to get in the meeting. So you're like, oh yeah, I'm just really curious. I would love to hear more about like development. I'm trying to get my way in, like myself, blah, 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 da, da, da. I just want to pick your brain. Like people love a let me pick your brain scenario. And then once you get on the call, you're like, hey, like this is my story. You treat it like a general meeting. You're like, oh, I'm thinking about this project, thinking about that project. And then if y'all vibe, then a greater likelihood is that the exec is going to be like, oh yeah, like whenever you finish your thing, send it my way, etc. And then I've seen people get read that way because they're like developing community in that sense and like making friends.
Okay, so make friends
Yeah.
and with the cover story, but also do it in a genuine way. So it has to sort of be that sort of that mesh between those two parts. So take us into the development room. Okay, you read a pitch or that one sheet, you like it, you bring it to the other execs, they like it, you want to start developing. What's that process like?
So usually that means that we would enter a deal phase, which can take like any number span of time. That's usually the slowest part of the process, honestly, because you have to get like your side attorneys involved, and then like hopefully the creative also has attorneys that they're working with to make sure that everything is equitable, and then like people go back and forth to get the deal all like ironed out in a way that feels the most like fruitful for everyone involved, etc. And once the deal is closed, then you start the development process, which is like, it depends on what the deal like says. So sometimes like a company will have quote unquote development funds, and they won't buy all the way into a project. Like there'll be a pitch, but no script. And they'll be like, okay, like we're going to use our development funds so that like writer X over there can like write the script out. And then if we're into that, then we'll pick that up to develop it. Other times it's like, all right, we made this deal with these companies involved. We're attaching a creative and it's like off to the races. So we're like getting like the pilot together, we're getting the season pitch together. And in the meantime, while we're working on that, like we're thinking about what the room should look like. So we're like building for television, we're building out like who should be in the writer's room, etc. Or for features, it'll be like, okay, like we'll start drafting this script or like rewriting the script if it was a script when it came in based on like what the direction via the company needs to be. So if we want to make it scarier, we want to have a stronger social message or whatever, what have you, it needs to be funnier for whatever particular company, then we start turning notes around and going through the draft process there. It's the most immediate like first steps.
So in that, I guess, pre-production phase or that development phase, would you say, what's your relationship like with the creative, whether that's the writer or the creator? So how connected are you through the writing process, and just if you could sort of take us into that space, what does that look like?
For sure. Some companies are super like hands off. They're like, all right, you go over there and live your best life, and we'll see you when we see you. And like it, and then like you check back in, you come back with a finished product, and everyone's like, okay, like now this is where we want to like dive in and give notes, etc. Other companies are very, very hands-on. They like do full breakdowns of the script. They're like, I don't understand why this happens. And like act 3, because you planted this in act 1 and it doesn't pay off, da, 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 da. Like Monkey Paw is a very like hands-on company in that sense, that they are like going to go through the narrative and like make sure that it's like as adherent to like story structure, what have you, like they're going to judge it the best that they can from that side of things. So it's like a different kind of creative working relationship, and they try to maintain like open lines of communication in that sense. So like if somebody wants to text at 1 o'clock in the morning, then they can. But we don't be texting like as an exec, we didn't text people at 1 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes creatives like hit us up and we'd be like, oh yeah, blah, 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 like hashing out ideas. But other companies will just like leave you all the way alone. And then there's in between states also, like some are very regimented, like here's all the notes calls that we're gonna have, here's like our benchmarks, like often like a date gets set way in the future, like this is when we want this to drop, what have you. And so like there's flexibility in that, but companies try to shoot towards delivery for that date of said thing. And so like schedules are determined based on that. And that like has a relationship to like deliverables and like making sure that people are delivering consistently as part of the job as an exec. And so sometimes it's like, okay, like this deliverable is coming in on time, everything's beautiful, like no worries. And then sometimes it's like, hey, where is this thing that we need? We need this, and it's just not here in our inbox. And so like how do we facilitate like an environment where the things are coming in when they need to come in so that we are on schedule, etc. And now like it comes back to communication.
And in terms of from your role, your perspective, but even just experience, have you found that most creatives are, or what type of creatives are sort of like are very supportive of feedback that's coming from you guys' side versus what type of creatives may not be as receptive?
It's interesting. I think like having been on both sides of it, like there is a delineation between like in terms of how people are able to communicate with each other. Like often execs don't matriculate through a creative system, so like they're not as familiar with like style structure of like writing in and of itself. So they can be like, I don't get why this happened, or like what have you, but they can't be like, okay, so in the darkest night here, like what's happened, like why this doesn't feel like it's paying off in the same way, because like the stakes and this part, whatever. But there are some that like are able to communicate in that way. And I think like that is the most glaring thing that I've noticed, is just like being able to have that one-to-one communication. But it depends on like the exec that you're working with, the company that you're working with, and the way that they work. Like I have talked to people at companies where they're like, do not propose solutions in your note giving, just ask questions, because it's not our job to propose solutions. And then other companies are like, all right, so you could do this or you could do that. Here are ways that we can like bolster this narrative in concrete like adjustments to the story. And sometimes as a creative, you're like, don't tell me what to do with this thing. Like you have no idea what's happening. This suggestion doesn't even make sense. And sometimes you're like, please just tell us what you want. Like, why are you just poking holes and not providing solutions to the problem? So it's like a varied amount of like pros and cons on both sides of those styles. Yeah.
You ahead of time sort of speak to the creative to find out what type of style they liked? Are they the type of creatives that want suggestions versus type of creatives that maybe just want questions and then they'll go figure it out? Is that a type of conversation that's had, or no?
It depends. I think it depends on like where you're coming from as a company. Like a smaller, like bespoke company might have the ability to like individualize in that way, but there's some like juggernaut conglomerates that like operate the way that they operate, and you're not going to be like, don't don't talk to me, like that's just not a thing. But also I think like on the creative side, like a lot of creatives will just like operate the way that they operate. So it's not even, I think a discussion beforehand might be helpful in solving some of those like communication like discrepancies, but often it's like a company will start out with like the way that they're used to operating, and then a creative will be like, I'm just not going to do that. and then you find out, or they'll be like, I need you to do this and this, and you'll be like, okay, yeah, we can do that. So it does adjust, but it's not as intentional as it should be, probably.
And in terms of with your time at Monkey Paw, were there any projects that you felt like you had probably a lot of influence in, or a good amount of influence in, that you were sort of proud of?
Yeah, I mean, nothing that has come out was anything that I had a direct like hand in, because I was promoted to the exec position like early last year. So like a lot of the stuff that I had a sort of creative hand in, the like stages of development haven't made it to the screen yet. But there was some cool stuff over there that I was like, okay, like I'm excited to see like the way that this goes, the way that this turns out. But nothing that I'm allowed to say.
Got it. And for those that don't know, because Monkey Paw is Jordan Peele's company, so that's Get Out, that's Us, and one of my Lovecraft.
Country,
Yeah,
Hunters.
exactly.
What do they have coming out? Like Sinkhole. There's
Nope.
stuff that I can't. Nope.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
That's around the corner.
yeah,
Yeehaw.
yeah.
Uh,
So that's that company for those that weren't sure, because we're saying Monkey Paw a lot, and some people obviously, some people know, some people don't. So I just wanted to
Fair.
clarify that. Yeah. So now you're on the writing side. Take
Right.
us to that writing. What is it like to be in that writer room? Sort of paint that picture for us.
For sure. I mean, it's excellent. It's like all of the sort of stuff that I love the most about development is like the whole gig in a writer's room. This one is like really fun because it's a genre show, and it's also like kind of YA, but it's very dark. So it's fun to be able to like play in that space. And the structure of this one is like really interesting. It's like pretty small. It's the showrunner and myself and one other writer. So it's the smallest room that I've been in thus far. But it's like very organized. Everything is like bop, 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 like we're getting everything done. And when we have to adjust, we do that in an organized way also, because like adjustment is inevitable, because like things shift and things change all the time. But this one, and then the one before it was like a YA teen show for Hulu, and it was like a large room, like pretty. I can't remember how many writers there were, but I know that I got on the Zoom and I was like, oh, there's so many people, so many people here, which I think is maybe more typical in the industry to have a larger room. The one that I'm on now is only my third one, so I don't actually know yet what like size is normal, but I think Love Victor had a more like typical size room. And we did a lot of like group writing, which is like a thing that happens like often where we're like all be on Zoom, we'll pull up final drafts and like walk through the scenes and like do our punches and do our like ideating and lay it all out together, and then like marry all of those just separate scenes into like what's called a Frankenstein draft. And then whoever's responsibility it is for the episode, like the writer whose name is going to be on the episode, will take the Frankenstein and then like marry it all together, give the jury a show it seems cohesive and coherent, pass it up to the showrunners who will do another pass, and then send it to studio. And then studio will be like, we love this, we don't like that, whatever. And send it back to the showrunners who do a pass, and like they organize passes in different ways. So like the writer can end up doing passes on it going forward, or the showrunners can do passes on it going forward. It depends. And we like the way that the one I'm in now works. I think we're thinking about doing group writing. I don't think we're gonna do that anymore. We're going straight to like writer's drafts, which is what the first show that I was on did. But that was a sort of unique situation because the room was mad short. It was only 8 weeks long. So we had time to like break, like which means we like walked through every episode and like walk through the points of like, this is what happens in this episode, this is what happens in that episode, so that we could like take those story beats and outline the episodes. And I think they were all, I don't even think they were all outlined by the time that they were like mostly outlined. And then because I was like, I just need to get this work done, I co-wrote that. So I like wrote my half and then I just left it in final draft and I was like, okay, goodbye. And then they were like, one day we'll call upon you for script. And then like months and months later, I started Victor and they were like, script please. And I was like, oh my God. So I like went and like edited and like worked with my co-writer to get that draft together and then gave it to our bosses and delivered it that way. But it's like everyone's a little bit different. Everyone's a little bit, like specific in the way that they like operate, because it's all based off of the way that the showrunner likes to like do stuff, and they've been through a ton of rooms and had a bunch of experiences, so they're like changing it up to their specific formula.
So if you could touch a bit more on the roles that exist in a writing room and what's the responsibility for those roles, just for those that don't know what goes on in the room.
That's an excellent question, because I had no idea until I got in there, and I was like, oh, there's so much going on. So often people coming into a writer's room will start out in like assistant positions. So like there's writer's PA, which is a person that like runs and grabs stuff and does like works with the like writer's assistants to like help make sure that everything is like not falling apart, so that the writers don't have notes breakdowns, all of that good stuff. So it starts out with writer's PA and then writer's assistant, which is like a general assistant for the room. Often there's like 2 assistants, because like the showrunner will have like an assistant for themselves because they're doing like a ton of things all the time. And then there'll be an assistant that's specifically for the room that like helps take notes and helps like organize your like drive folders and like make sure that like the drafts are all cohesive and all that good stuff. And their main focus is the show in and of itself. And then there's staff writer, which is my first gig. That's like the least sort of like spicy way that you can come into a writer's room. It's the first entry level like official writing position, and so you don't have a ton of responsibility, but you have like input doing whatever like the showrunner needs you to do. Sometimes you might get a script, sometimes you might not. It depends on like the structure and need of the room. Like I got a script on my first show, but not on my second, because like I joined that room midway and it was already in process and all that good stuff. So there's staff writer, there's story editor, there's executive story editor, there's co-producer, producer, co-executive producer, and executive producer. And I think there might be some other stuff in there also, but the job for the most part, until you get to like producer, co-producer, is pretty much the same, in that you're like all in the room together, ideating, helping like structure the episodes and the season, and then you go off to do the writing as the work is divided. And then on the like higher rungs of the ladder, so like co-producer and above, then you start helping with like the organization of the room in and of itself, which is like they had a meeting about schedule today, and it's like, okay, like we're changing like when we're supposed to be breaking these episodes, and we're changing like when we're supposed to be outlining these, and when people go off to writers drafts and things like that. And like sometimes you might be like if the showrunner is gone or what have you, then like the co-EP or if the showrunner and the co-EP are gone, like whoever is next on the ladder will help like set the agenda for the day, like be the people writing on the board, organizing and directing the room for whatever the task that layhead might be. Yeah, and the other thing that is like a thing that I tell people is that you need to apparently like make an S corporation. So Google that when you get your first writing gig, because I was like, yo, what's happening? And it took me a long time to figure it out. So S corporations and creative, like it's like that thing at the end of a show where it's like a company that you've never heard of. And you're like, what is this company? It's like the writers have an independent company so they can get paid, so they don't get taxed as though they're working for that job for 52 weeks in a year instead of like 24. So it's a lot of rigmarole, but like keep it in mind.
Each writer has their own company, or is there one company that does it for all of it?
Each writer has their own. It's
Okay.
like you like make an independent like corporation in order to get like paid, and you have to like file with the state and all of that good stuff so that you can do that and not like, because otherwise they'll tax you to like the nth degree, and then you have to wait until you file to get paid, and if you're poor it's like
Problem.
an issue. So
in that room, how did they decide who gets the writer credit? Because it's coming from various. It's a community of ideas, right? Is there sort of a structure of how credits is given as per episode?
I'm sure there is. I have not been privy to like what makes people decide what thing. What I do feel is for sure is that like in the first few weeks of the room, the showrunner is like, and this is based on nothing other than like feeling and like what I think is going on. The showrunner is like observing like what pitches are being like sent out, like how this person relates and the way that they like are talking about like the show, like how they write a little bit, because you'll have like I think like scenes get thrown your way and you have to like execute that and see. And I think like if I am observing correctly, the showrunners are like evaluating like what the vibes are of each writer in that span of time. And then after that happens, it's like, okay, we'll put this person on this episode, we'll put that person on this episode, whatever division of labor they've decided up until that point based on those things. And then I think like they decide that way. It's not arbitrary. It's definitely like thought out, but I don't know the ins and outs of the thought process.
And I know this probably changes from show to show or project to project, but what's sort of the timeline for getting episodes written? I know it's very varies, but we'll keep it within what you're doing, the show that you're on right now.
For sure. The first show I was on was like months, but this show, it's like, okay, we'll have like like a week or so, or so to get a draft written. So it like really, really varies. And then in that, it's like, okay, we're turning around drafts of things so that we can like make sure that we're getting things to the studio on time, that they're getting their notes in, and then we're like rewriting in that like vein so that everything's on schedule, because the show has a like, this is the first season of this show and it has an air date of next summer, so like it's shooting in the fall, so we're like trying to get all of the things done by a particular time so that it can start shooting at a particular time, you know.
And I know you touched a bit on how you got into the room, but what are some other ways that you've heard of other people getting into the room, whether that's coming in as a PA, just for those that, you know, are asking, how do I get into that space? There's a variety of ways, but like, what are some ways that you can sort of impart on people that want to be able to get into the room?
To get into a writer's room, I think like there's a couple of different ways to go about it. It's like, in terms of the way that shows are staffing in particular, like some shows will hire like a few writers, something will happen, they'll need another writer down the line, then it's like, okay, like who do y'all know? Because the first like resource is the network of writers that are already present. So it'll be like, okay, like I know this person's really good at this, and this, like they would be really good for the show. So it's like, who do you know that's in rooms already that can provide like a sort of pipeline for you? Like I had someone talking about like a writer's assistant gig on a show the other day, and then my friend hit me up today and I was like, I need a gig, and I was like, oh shit, like I just talked to someone who was talking about a gig, and so I was like, let's connect these dots and make sure that it happens. And like there are like, honestly, like it's the homie network, it's the friendship network.
Yeah, we're back to that.
It's really that at the end of the day, because it's like, yes, like of course, like you are meeting people and you're having interviews, you're having generals with people all the time if you're repped, and then like making those connections and hopefully maintaining them, etc. But it's like I'm trying to think, like this job, like my reps got me into the room for, because I like talked to them. I was like, I really want to do a genre show next. Like that's the lane that I want to be working in. Like would love to pursue that. And then they got me the interview for this gig. And I like knew a little about my boss because my friend had worked with him on something else. So I was like, all right, like let me do my research. Let me see like what this person's like interests are, etc. And like we were able to just like chat about stuff that we had like common interest in, and that was like what got me into the room. And like I think in terms of like getting the specific job, I always recommend like go on YouTube, like see if you can find this person like speaking, talking, being themselves, because I know that I'm more comfortable when I know what situation I'm walking into. So like I try to get to know the person as much as possible, like before I get into the room with them. If it's like a stakes based thing, like a job interview or something like that, I'll go in blind to like a regular general, unless there's someone like that I really, really want to work with, and then I'm still doing life research so I can ask those questions and be like, so when you transitioned from this job to this job, like what was your experience and all of that good stuff. So research is also super important. And like finding like communities that like are specific to you, like Black Film Allegiance post jobs all the time, Black Film Space, like In the Cut. Those are all like I think those are all Black film led like organizations that help provide connectivity and like access to job spaces, and finding things that are like specific to the way that you identify and navigate the industry is also helpful so that you can establish those networks too. And so like Instagram, Twitter. Honestly, like I got my job at Monkey Paw on Twitter because I like looked up their website. This is like back in 2017, I think. And there was nothing on the website. It was just like, it was like Monkey Paw Productions. You couldn't click it. It didn't do anything. Like nothing was happening. And so I just followed them on Twitter and then tweeted a joke at them or whatever. And like, can I come to the office or something? Question mark. And then Matthew Cherry, who worked there at the time, responded. It's like, just like DM me, and I did. And he sent me someone's email address, and I sent my resume. And so like being up on the goings on of the companies that you're interested in, of the shows that you're interested in, of like what shows are coming up, like checking out the trades and seeing what's happening, all super, super useful.
And to get in the room, you don't need to be repped before you get in the room, or do you need to be roughly?
Often people are repped before they get into a room, but it's not like completely necessary. Like I worked with, I think I've only worked with one person who wasn't repped and was in a rooms because they had a relationship with the showrunner, if I'm not mistaken. So it is a thing that can happen for sure. It's just like after that job with that person wraps, it's like how do we get from point A to point B for the next gig? And having a rep is really, really helpful because they're doing all of that like background work and making those connections and things like for you, so you don't have to worry about it. So you can like spend time writing or spend time like working, whatever you need to be doing, while they're like bobbing and weaving and making the connects, you know.
And you mentioned this a couple of times, but just for those that don't know, could you explain what a general is, or general meeting, just for
sure. That's like me. And so who did I meet the other day? Like I met this guy named Masioka, who is like basically the conduit between like anime, manga in Japan and like the American market, right? And there was no agenda set for that meeting because like I don't have any projects at the moment that I know that I want to develop, but I know that I want to talk to this guy because he's working on all of the cool shit. So I like hit my reps up. I was like, can I have a general with Mossy? They were like, yes, wonderful. Like we'll get it set up. And then like hopped on, talked to him about his career. He's a super cool dude. He like came up working at like ILM and then transitioned to acting and then transitioned from that to what he's doing now. And I think he still acts and all that good stuff. But we talked about like where he's coming from, where I'm coming from, what our interests are, what he's working on, what I'm working on, and ended with like, here's my email, like hit me up. So if you're interested in doing something, like you have me as a line of communication, and also like I'll keep you in mind for the stuff that I'm working on. And it's just like establishing those relationships and establishing those connects in that way. And that can, if you have something that you are working on, that's a great way to like float it in a meeting without any stakes. You're like, oh yeah, like I'm working on a project about this, I'm working on a project about that, like if it's appropriate for the whoever you're talking to, because sometimes like I'm working on stuff but it wasn't like something I would want to develop into an anime or manga right now, and it wasn't based in that IP, so it wouldn't necessarily make sense. But like other meetings, it's like, oh yeah, I am working on a musical about like polyamory and like parenting in New York or whatever. Like you have that like available to you as a resource without like putting the pressure of like a full pitch on you. But most of the time it's like, I'm getting to know you, you're getting to know me, like here's what's available to you. And like in terms of like, here's what I can do as a writer, and then here's what's available to me in terms of like what that company is working on, what their values are, what creative pursuits they're in, etc.
Was it someone that your reps already had a relationship with, or they could just reach out to them because they're a rep?
I think they knew him tangentially, I want to say. I'm not fully like clear on how, like how that relationship exists, but they didn't rep him. But sometimes it is like I rep this person, like y'all are basically like cousins because of that. And so like we'll meet like people that or like get things set up because like we share a rep in that way. I think my first gig, like they repped that showrunner, and so they were able to be like, Jasmine is cool, like this guy's cool, like y'all will vibe, what have you. They set it up that way. But sometimes they just like reach out to other people's reps or what have you, so that you can make a creative working relationship that way. And I haven't done this as much, but you can also like set journals up with other writers that you think are cool, that you just want to get to know, establish creative working relationships with, and not just like execs or like development execs or creative execs or like showrunners or things like that. You can use it to cross network also, which I would like to do more of, but I haven't endeavored into yet.
Okay. And what's the future for Jasmine? Like what's where do you want to go eventually?
The future, I want to go as far away as possible.
What does that look like?
I want to be on a farm and not have to fuck with capitalism. But in the meantime, I want to like make cool shit. Hopefully, like the more like I would like to get a show made ostensibly, and like do some film stuff. I'm constantly wavering on the state of cinema in general, but I still want to make movies, so it is what it is. And there's one short in particular, which I think you read, that I really want to get done, that I need to stop talking about and just be about, actually. So that's probably my next, like, I'm just going to do this thing. Let me just figure out how to do it situation. And then in the meantime, just like working on other spec scripts to get out there and looking for like other writers and gigs in the meantime.
There any specific type of stories that you want to tell, or you're just sort of open to whatever?
Oh no, I like love working in a like folktale-y space. I'm interested in like Black histories, Black community. So like any storytelling that deals in that and like re-examining that and from new angles, from fresh perspectives, and I'm really interested in. So like, and I still love horror. I love like a good musical. So like those are I think there's a musical thing that I really want to work on, and like period piece that I really want to work on is the top two next things that I'll probably like write, but I need to write.
So we're gonna hold you to that. You said you're gonna work on these things. So we're gonna expect see your name attached to some of these things in the near future.
That part, you got it. Hold me accountable, Rich. I appreciate that.
I'm going to hold, and I'm especially going to hold you to that the short script you shared to me.
For sure.
So that needs to get created. So I'm going to hold you to that. No, so thanks so much for all the information that you provided here. I know it's going to be very helpful to someone, and hopefully, you know, they get a lot of it. I'm learning as you're speaking about your process too, so that's important. And thanks again. And that's Jasmyne Peck, just Jasmyne Peck. We went from a development exec to now being on the writing side of a show coming out on Disney Plus.
Mm-hmm. And that's next summer.
What's the name of it, sir?
The Spiderwick Chronicles.
The Spiderwick Chronicles, and that's on Disney next summer. So hopefully we get to see your name under one of the written credits, and we can say she talked about it here first. But I read a brief sort of synopsis on it. It seems like a very, very, very interesting, cool sort of world building type of story. So we'll definitely be looking out for that. So, all right, and that's it.